Okay, Bruchim Abba, welcome everyone. Shalom Aleichem. We have an amazing topic today. We're going to be discussing the fall of Syria in preparation for the Yom Tov of Chanukah. This could not be at a more opportune time, and many are not even aware of the geography and topography of Syria in relation to the land of Israel, and where Damascus is, and why this is so important to the Yom Tov of Chanukah. Just by way of preparation, the new Sefer of Zakini Legadel is now available. You could get it at our site, rabbidg.com. You could order it with free shipping. That's available if anybody wants to participate in the Sefer, the Ben La'ashri, the Chidushim of the Tzadik Ranana, who offers that he will be mispalo for those who say over his Divrei Torah. That is now in publication, if anybody would like to be mishtatev. And this is the first time I'm announcing, if anybody wants to see on our site, one of the two new things that are being worked on that you might be interested in. Because many people say, I'm looking forward to the Yom Tov of Pesach, but I already have so many Haggadahs, so what am I going to do this year? Okay, so I have a good suggestion for you. Check this out. You could really enhance your Seder this year by getting a Spanish and French Haggadah. I mean, can you imagine how exciting the Seder will be if you say the Manishtana in Spanish and French? So that we're working on translating the Haggadah into Spanish and French, and that is available if you'd like to be mishtativ in that. Okay, we have an amazing topic today. As I mentioned, the fall of Syria, where it's hard to understand exactly what role this will have in the future of the Jewish state and the future of the Jewish people. But we know that Assad had a very brutal regime, and hopefully this will bring more peace to the entire region. But what's relevant to us today is to understand what its connection is to the Yom Tov of Chanukah. Rabbi Chanan Wasserman in the Kovetz Haaretz asks a very stirring question. We all know that Chanukah and Purim are fundamentally different. Everybody knows Chanukah we celebrate spiritually, Lahaidasu Lahalel, we say Al Anisim, we say Halel. These are integral parts of the Yom Tov. We are not mandated to celebrate physically. Purim, on the other hand, we do not say Hallel. Instead, on Purim, we celebrate both Mishteh and Simcha. And the reason for that is because on Chanukah, they try to take away our religion, and on Purim, they try to kill us physically. But Rabbi Chanan asks a much more fundamental and basic question. And that is, Rabbi Chanan says, let us study the different reactions that the Jewish people had in the times of Chanukah and Purim. In the times of Chanukah, we did something very unusual. You see, in Purim, we did what typically Jews do. We fasted and we prayed. And Esther said, Lech, says, Kol hayudim hanimtzim b'Shushan v'tzumu alai v'al toichelu v'al tishtu. They fasted and they prayed. However, when it comes to Chanukah, we did something very unusual. We went to war. We went to war. And it's not because we thought we would win the war. You cannot say they thought they would win the war. How could they have thought they would win the war? It was Rabin b'yad ma'atim. It was very unlikely to win the war. Rashi brings down in V'zois HaBracha that it was literally just Matasio and his children that went to war, and that's it. There were no other soldiers. Rav Matasio Solomon would say this over very often. So they did not think they would win the war. Why is it that in the times of Chanukah, they fought a war? We don't find necessarily they went to do tshuva. Probably they did tshuva. I'm sure they did tshuva. But the reaction that we find is they went to fight a physical war. And in the times of Purim, they celebrated, in times of Purim, they did tshuva. Why do we find these two very diametrically different reactions? By the way, we once answered this question based on the Bach, and if you want to read about it, you can read about it in The Light and the Splendor, that when they tried to take away our religion, that's the act of the Satan. So it's not the act of God to take away the religion. So against the Satan, you have to fight. And therefore in times of Chanukah, they went to fight. In the times of Purim, Klal Yisrael's lives were in danger. Well, that can never happen. Well, it must be Hashem was trying to stir us to do tshuva. So that's what we did. Okay, but we're going to try to study further today. Why in the times of Chanukah did they specifically go to war? That's the kasha of Rabbi Chanan. Let's add to that isn't it unusual for the response of the Jewish people to go to war? I mean, we've been in many exiles in our history, starting with the Babylonians. Do we ever find the Jewish people fought against Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians? No, we never find such a reaction that the Jewish people fought against the Babylonians. In the times of Purim, do we find that the Jews armed and fought against Achashverosh? No. In the times of the Romans, was the Jewish response to fight a war? No. In fact, the Gemara says that the Romans surrounded Yerushalayim in times of the second Beis HaMikdash, and the Bar Yonim, the bandits, wanted to fight a war, and the rabbis wanted to make peace, because Jewish practice is to be peaceful. We do not typically react with warfare. Why then specifically in the time? Look, I was in yeshiva for many years. I've seen many kol koires of the Mayesas Gdolei HaTorah. The Aguda sends out monthly kol koires of the Mayesas Gdolei HaTorah. I don't remember in my lifetime the Mayesas Gdolei HaTorah ever issuing a kol koreh. I want everybody arming themselves with knives and slingshots. We're going to war. That has never in my lifetime been. I've never seen a kol koreh like that, not sent out by the Aguda, not in Mea Sha'arim. I've never heard Gedolim call for war. That is not typically a Jewish response, not in any of our Golosim, except for Chanukah. Why? Why all of a sudden in Chanukah did we have this unusual response where we went to war? Okay, I think it's a very important question. You know, we take it for granted. Yeah, Chanukah, they went to war. But when else did we ever go to war in our history? In the Tanakh, in the Mishnah, in the Gemara. Very unusual. So, let's begin with the great revelation of Reb Tzadok HaKohen, and this is going to be amazing what the recent downfall of Syria has to do with Chanukah and hopefully even better times. The Reb Tzadok HaKohen reveals to us that everything, wherever it is found in the Torah, first, that is its root. In other words, if you wanted to know what something is, if you wanted to know the essence of something, go to the first time it's mentioned in the Torah. It says Reb Tzadok HaKohen, I think I have such a tradition. If not, it's true anyway, but I think I have such a tradition. So the root of anything is the first time it's mentioned in the Torah. Where does such an idea come from? Maybe it comes from a Gemara in Bava Kama. I'm going to ask you now a personal question. Raise your hand if you have dreams. Anyone here have dreams? Okay. Raise your hand if you've ever seen the letter Tes in a dream. Did you ever see the letter Tes in a dream? It's a good sign, okay? It's good to see a Tes in a dream. So maybe tonight when you go to sleep, you might want to meditate on the letter Tes, because you never know. Maybe you'll see a Tes in a dream. Why is it a good thing? So the Gemara says, because it says Toiv in the Torah. So the Gemara says, well, there are bad things that it says with a Tes. Like, I'm going to sweep you away. V'tata osei b'matatai hashmeid. So the Gemara says, yeah, well, the first time Tes is written in the Torah is Toiv. And therefore, the first time establishes the essence of something. The bottom line is, we see from here that the first time that something is reported in the Torah, that is the essence of the item. So if in the times of Chanukah we went to war, it has to be that the war in the times of Chanukah is found and alluded to somewhere in the Torah, and probably in Bereshis, because Masa Avos Siman Labanim. So the question is, what is the first war recorded in the Torah? Anybody know? The first war recorded in the Torah is the war of the 4 kings and the 5 kings. Vayehi bimei Amrafel melech Shinar Aryaich melech Elasar Kedar la'omer melech Elam Visidal melech Goyim. It was in the days of Amrafel, king of Shinar, Aryaich, king of Elasar, Kedar la'omer, king of Elam, and Sidal melech Goyim. So now, lahavdil elaf alfei avdalis. I don't know anything about baseball. In fact, I never even heard of baseball. I don't even know baseball exists. But somebody once told me about it, and I listen because I have to be able to speak to people sometimes. So in baseball, there's something called a batting order, right? So the first guy is the leadoff hitter, the second guy is in the 2-hole, the third guy is in the 3-slot, and the fourth guy is the cleanup hitter. Not that I know about it, I'm just repeating that somebody once told me. Yeah. Anyway, so lahavda, if we would apply that here, Amrafel is the leadoff hitter, followed by Aryaich, in the 3-hole is Kedar la'omer, and then cleanup is Sidal melech Goyim. Okay? It's interesting. After the Torah gives us the batting order, it's, so to speak, the cleanup hitter, the 3-hole hitter, the Kedar la'omer, he takes off the leadoff spot. It says 12 years they served Kedar la'omer, and the 13th year he rebelled. And in the 14th year, Kedar la'omer came, Eis Kedar la'omer, all of a sudden the 3-hitter became the leadoff hitter. Now, if only Kedar la'omer would have known what kind of contract he would have been able to get, if he would have known he could get close to $1 billion. But whatever, back in the day with inflation, he probably couldn't get the same amount of money. And Kedar la'omer, the king of Elam, Kedar la'omer, the king of Elam, he all of a sudden, even though he was listed 3rd, he takes over as number 1. Now, we once spoke about that. Actually, we have a mimer about that in the Sefer Bereshis. But now we're going to offer another very amazing approach. The Bereshis Rabbah says these 4 kings represent the 4 Malchios. So Amrafel is Babylon. Aryaich melech Elasar is Greece, Antiochus. Kedar la'omer is Madai. And Sidal is Edom. Which is interesting. That means Kedar la'omer is Persia, which means that since Kedar la'omer was the main king, Avram Avinu predominantly fought Kedar la'omer, which is Persia, which is Achashverosh, which is not going to help us out at all in this year, because we're trying to show precedent why they fought in the times of Greece. The issue with this medrash is, for some reason, it's not listed in order. Amrafel number 1 is Babylon. Yeah, Babylon is number 1. Aryaich melech Elasar is Greece. Greece is not the second empire, the second exile. It's the 3rd. Kedar la'omer is listed as number 3, Madai. Madai is usually number 2. But amazingly, if you look in the Ramban has a different girsa here. That Amrafel, king of Shinar, is the king of Babel. Elasar, Aryaich melech Elasar is Madai, like it is in order. And Kedar la'omer, melech Elam, is Greece. And Rav Shavel writes in his notes on the Ramban that the Ramban's girsa of the list of the 4 kings is more accurate because it's in order of Bavel, Paras, Yavan, Roimi. Wow. Do you understand what just happened? That Avram Avinu is fighting 4 kings. He's fighting Amrafel. He's fighting Aryaich. He's fighting Kedar la'omer. Kedar la'omer is the king of Greece. And of all the kings that Avram Avinu is fighting, Eis Kedar la'omer, which is Greece, is the main king that Avram's fighting. So even though when it comes to Bavel, Avram Avinu is not fighting Shinar Melech Bavel, and he's not fighting Sidon Melech Goyim Roimi. And he's not fighting Arioch Melech Halasar Persia, but he's fighting Kedar L'Omer Melech Elam, Greece. Why? Because the only time the Jewish people ever fight a war is against Greece. So here we have it. The root of the war of Chanukah is found in Avram Avinu going to fight the four kings. The four kings represent the four Malchios. And Kedar L'Omer, who's the main king that Avram is fighting, according to Ramban, is Greece. So coming back to Rabbi Chanan's kasha, maybe we could suggest, Rabbi Chanan wants to know, why only in the times of Chanukah do we fight a war? The answer is because everything is rooted in the Torah. Like Rabbi Chanan himself says, Shiurim says, if you don't know what to do, most beautiful of ladies, it's a reference to the Jewish people, that when we don't know what to do, what should we do? Go in the model of the sheep, follow your predecessors. We don't have any precedent to fight Babylon. We don't have a precedent to fight Rome. We don't have a precedent to fight Persia. We do have a precedent to fight Greece, because Avram Avinu went to fight Kedar L'Omer, which according to Ramban is Greece. Now this is the discovery of the Sefer Chikrei Lev of Reb Leib Haiman, and I'm trying to use that to explain and answer Rabbi Chanan's question of why we went to war specifically in times of Chanukah. Now watch this. You know, if the war of Avram Avinu against the four kings is the precedent for Chanukah, well, the war in the times of Chanukah is described in 5 terms. Rabim biad ma'atim, Tameim biad tahirim, Rishayim biad tzadikim, Zaydim biad oiskei sarasecha, and of course number 1, Giborim biad chalashim. Masarto Giborim biad chalashim. Now, you know what the four kings were called? Rashi in Lech Lecha says, when Avram Avinu went to war against the four kings, the chidush is, V'afal pi kei natzcho hamuatim. Even though the four kings were less than the 5 kings, they were victorious. Lahoidiacha shegiboirim hayu, because they were mighty. So when Avram Avinu went to war against the 4 kings, it was Giboirim biad chalashim. They were mighty. Avraham and his men, what strength did they have? Giboirim biad chalashim. What about Rabim biad ma'atim? The Medrash says, you know how many soldiers the 4 kings had? The Medrash says that they had thousands and thousands of soldiers. Thousands and thousands of soldiers. So the Medrash in Bereshis Rabbah says, Alafim Rabim, many thousands. How many people did Avram Avinu have? Well, the pasuk says he only took with him 318 men. Shmaina Asar Ushloish Meyos. And according to the Medrash, he just took one guy with him, Eliezer, and his gematria was 318. So that Avram Avinu fighting the war against the 4 kings was certainly Rabim biad ma'atim. Avraham was the ma'atim. What about Tameim biad tahirim? Certainly that was the case. Chazal tell us in Bab Metzia, Avram Avinu was oichel chulin b'tahara. Avram Avinu ate even chulin b'tahara. That's why when Sarah became Anida, Avram Avinu did not serve the bread. So the war of Avraham against the 4 kings was Tameim biad tahirim. One of the reasons Avraham Avinu circumcised his men is so that they don't contaminate the food and render the food tameh. Rishayim biad tzadikim. Well, Amraphel, who was the head of the 4 kings, what does the pasuk call him? Cherev paschu Rishayim. Chazal say Ze Amraphel. And then Zaydim biad oiskei torasecha. Avram Avinu, the Gemara says in Yuma, was Zakein v'Yoshev b'Yeshiva. Avram Avinu had a very large Masechta Avodah Zarah. So the war of Avram against the four kings is the precedent and the root in the Torah for the war of Chanukah. Coming back again to Rabbi Chanan's question, why is it we never find the Jewish responses to fight a war? Why dafka in the times of Chanukah? The answer is because of all the nationalities. Avram Avinu fought, not Amraphel, not Aryoch, not any of the, not Sidal, but he fought Kedar La'omer, the king of Yavan. And all of the descriptions of the war of Chanukah are found by Avram against the four kings. Now this is out of this world. What does the Torah call Abraham's men who he took to fight against Kedar La'omer? Vayorek es Chanichav. Abraham took his Chanukah people. Rashi says, what does Chanichav mean? Chanichoiksiv. It's a lashon of inauguration, like Chanoich Lanar, or Chanukas HaMizbeach, or Chanukas Mizmar Sher Chanukas Habayis. So Avram Avinu took his Chanukah people. How many times in Tanakh are people called Chanukah people? The answer is this is the only time. You think it's a coincidence that Dafka, at this occasion, the people that Avram Avinu took to fight against Kedar La'omer, Melech Elam, to fight against Greece, that they're called Chanukah people? You think that's a coincidence that in this context they're called Chanukah people? Says Reb Leib Hyman, this is the Shoresh in the Torah for the war against the Yevanim, the war of Chanukah. Of course the Torah is going to reference Chanukah, and the proof that Rashi brings that Chanichav means inauguration, Rashi brings proofs from literally Chanukah, from the inauguration of the Mizbeach, which we know is connected to Chanukah, from the Chanukas Habayis, which we know is connected to Chanukah. Now, if you look in the Targum says, Vayorek, Vayishma Avram ki nishba achiv. Avram heard that his brother was captured. Vayarek es chanikav. V'zareis yas uleimahi. V'zareis. He alertly galvanized his people. V'zareis. V'zareis. Who are usually described as v'zareis? As zrizim? Kaihanim. Kaihanim zrizim him. Isn't it interesting that of all the things that Avram Avinu did, this one is described with zrizus, because this is the war that is the source of the war of Chanukah. And therefore it is specifically referred to in a terminology that describes what Kaihanim do, vizares. Now, we find an amazing description of Yavan. In Bereshis Rabbah, in the beginning of the Torah, on the pasuk, V'ha'aretz hoisa soihu, Vavayu, v'choshech al pnei sahim. I'll tell you a little secret. There are many things in Bereshis that are four, like v'haaretz hoisa soihu, vavayu, v'choshech al pnei sahim, or the four waters, the rivers of Gan Eden, or ema chashecha gedoyla noifeles. And you could be sure whenever the number 4 is found in Bereshis, it's a reference. The Medrash will say it refers to the 4 Malchios. So the Medrash says, V'ha'aretz hoisa soihu is Babylon, Vayhu is Persia, Vayavhilu v'yes Haman. Darkness is Yavan, that they darkened the eyes of the Jewish people with their decrees. And they said, right on the horn of an ox, that you don't have a chilek with the God of Israel. So of all the exiles, the one that is called darkness is called Greece. Greece, Yavan, is called darkness. If Avram Avinu is fighting the Greeks, you think it's going to be during the day or it's going to be during the night? You better believe it's going to be during the night, because Greece is darkness. Therefore the pasuk says, Vayechalek aleihem laila. He divided against them in the night. It's the battle against darkness. Greece is called darkness. He's fighting Kedar La'omer. Kedar La'omer is the king of Greece. And if Avram Avinu is fighting Yavan, which is Chashecha, then Avram Avinu then should be the allegory to light. And indeed, the Medrash says, Vayomer Elokim Yehi Ar. And the Almighty said, let there be light. What does that refer to? That refers to Avraham Avinu. Says Bereshis Rabbah, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ad Masai Yehei Ha'olam Misnaheg Ba'afela. Until when will the world conduct itself in darkness? Let the light come, bring on the light. Shenemar Vayomer Elokim Yehi Ar, Zeh Avraham, Hadahu D'chsiv, Mi Heir, Mi Mizrach, Tzedek. Avraham is the light. Vayomer Elokim Yehi Ar is the light. The war against Kedar La'omer happened in the night because it's the war against Yavan. Shech Leinem Shel Yisrael B'Gzei Roiseyem. And Avram Avinu is considered the light. And now, Rabbi Isai, I would like you to fasten your seatbelts, but for this you're going to need to put on your shoulder strap as well. I don't want anyone hitting the ceiling. If the war of Avraham against Kedar La'omer is the root in the Torah for the war against Chanukah and the war against the Greeks, but in times of Chanukah, were we fighting regular garden variety Greeks? This wasn't just regular Greeks. What kind of Greeks were they? They were Syrian Greeks. They were Syrian Greeks. Oh, they were Syrian Greeks? Watch this. Avram Avinu, where does he chase them? Check this out, number 18. Vayechalek aleihem laila hu va'avada vayakem vayerdefem ad chayva asher misamoil ledamasek. Avram Avinu chases them to Damascus. Ooh, interesting. Why in the world is he chasing these kings to Damascus? The answer is Avram Avinu is setting the precedent for Chanukah. The war of the Greeks against the Greeks in Chanukah was the war against Syrian Greeks. Avram Avinu knows if he's going to be victorious and set a precedent for the victory over the Greeks, he has to chase them back all the way to their root. And therefore, he chases them back all the way to Damascus, all the way to Syria. By the way, this week, they took control over the Syrian side of the Hermon. Why? In preparation for Chanukah. You know that Chazal tell us that when Mashiach comes, Yerushalayim will spread out all the way until Damascus. We daven for this every Friday night. We say, Yaminu Smal Tifraitzi. We daven for the expansion of Yerushalayim all the way to Damascus. So the war of Avram Avinu against the kings is extremely compelling, that this war was the root of the victory of Chanukah. And therefore it took place at night because the Greeks were Hechshichu Eineim Shel Yisrael B'Gzei Roiseyem. And the war also was against Kedar La'omer, the king of Yavan. Marv Rabbi Isai, did you notice something interesting that it says in this war against the four kings? Did you notice it says, O Malki Tzedek Melech Shalem Hoitzi Lechem V'Yayin V'Hu Chayhein Le'el El Yayin. He's a Kohen. To who? To the God on high. Vayivarchehu Vayoymar Baruch Avram Le'el Elyon Koinei Shamayim Va'aretz. Again, another reference to Kel Elyon. Uvaruch El Elyon Asher Migein Tzarecha Biadecha Vayiten Loi Maaser Mikael. How come it keeps on saying Kel Elyon here? Why does it keep on saying Kel Elyon here? Says Rav Haiman. The Gemara in Rosh Hashanah says on Daf Yud Chesam and Beis that the Malchus Yavan made a gzeira that we're not allowed to say Shem Shamayim. And when the Chashmonaim prevailed and they were victorious, Hiskinu Shayu Mazkirin Shem Shamayim. They made a decree that we would declare and mention the name of God, Afilu B'shtaros, even on documents. And you know what they would write on documents? it happened this and this year of Yochanan Kohen Gadol Le'Keil Elyon, that the takana of the Chashmonaim was that in order to counteract the decree of the Yevanim that we're now to be mentioning the Shem Shamayim, they dafka were masakin that we try to mention Shem Shamayim as much as possible, and therefore they were masakin even in shtaros. We write such and such year of Yochanan and Lekeil Elyon, not Yochanan L'Shakai, Yochanan L'Tzvakos, Yochanan Le'Elokim, Yochanan Lekeil Elyon. Where did they come up with Kel Elyon for? When has God ever called Kel Elyon? The answer is they took it from the root of Chanukah. You know why the Torah keeps on mentioning Kel Elyon in reference to Avram Avinu's war? Because Avram Avinu's war was the victory over the Yevanim. And part of the victory of the Yevanim is to mention the name of Hashem repeatedly. Therefore it says Kel Elyon, Kel Elyon, Kel Elyon, Kel Elyon. Like the Chashmonaim were masakin to be Mazkir Shem Shamayim. And therefore the Chashmonaim were masakin to write in shtaros dafka Yochanan Lekeil Elyon. Now, says Rabbi Leib Hyman, if the root of something is the first time it's mentioned in the Torah, where is the first time in the Torah Kohen is mentioned? Where is the first time in the Torah Kohen is mentioned? In this episode. U'malki tzedek melech shalem hoitzi lechem v'yayin v'hu Kohen Lekeil Elyon. Why is Kohen mentioned here? Because this is the root of Chanukah in the Torah that came about Al Yedei Kohanecha HaKadoshim. Now, so you'll ask two things. First of all, but Avram Avinu is the one who won the war, not Malki Tzedek. So very nice, a Kohen comes into the narrative, but shouldn't Avraham Avinu, the victor, be the Kohen? And in fact, the Yalkut Shimoni says that because Shem praised Avraham before God, Shem lost the kahuna to Avram. So the Kohen here of the Hu Kohen Lekeil Elyon is not Shem was the Kohen, Avram was the Kohen. The Hu Kohen, Avram was the Kohen. So you say, but wait a second. But the Chashmonaim were led by the Kohen Gadol. Well, Bereshis Rabbah, Parsha Memvav, Ois Hey. I updated the sheet. I have to get you an updated sheet. In my sheet, this will be number 36. Not only was Avram a Kohen, Avram was a Kohen Gadol. By the way, Avram Avinu had to be a Kohen Gadol. Otherwise, he couldn't do the Akedah. Why? Because after Avram Avinu killed Yitzchak, how could it be makriv him? He's an oinain, and an oinain can't bring a carbon. The answer is right, but a Kohen Gadol could be makriv oinain. So we know Avram Avinu had to be a Kohen Gadol. So Avram Avinu is literally the precedent and the root and the shoyresh and the masa'avay sim labanim to the victory of Chanukah. And if you want to know a little bit deeper, why is Hashem repeatedly called Keil Elyon in reference to this war of the 4 kings against the 5 kings? You know that the Ben Ish Chai writes in his drashos that the word Elyon, Rabbi Isai, you're not going to believe it. The word Elyon is a compound word. Elyon is Al Yavan. Elyon is Al Yavan. So here it is, Avram Avinu, the Kohen Gadol, the Ma'atim is fighting the Merubim, the Chaloshim are fighting the Gibarim. He's doing it at night because the Yevanim are Hechshichu Eineim Shal Yisrael, and he makes sure to cause them to retreat all the way to their source, all the way to Damascus. You think it's a coincidence in the first week of Chodesh Kislev we have the fall of Syria? This is all preparation for Chanukah. Now, two things. The Shiltus says something very unusual. You know, the Gemara in Shabbos on Daf Chav Beis says, where do you put the menorah? You put the menorah mezuzah miyamin, u'menorah b'smail, right? Why? So that you should be surrounded with mitzvahs. Ner Chanukah mezuzah biyamin, v'ner Chanukah b'smail. The Ritva adds, and this is a teaching of the Shiltus, says the Shiltus, Ner Chanukah mezuzah, ki heichid have mezuzah miyamin, ner Chanukah mismal, ubalabayis betalis mitzuyetzes beinayim, and the balabayis wearing a talis in between. That's not what the Gemara says. The Gemara says mezuzah on the right side and ner Chanukah on the left side. The Gemara adds, and the balabayis wearing a talis in between. Why would? First of all, a talis, you're supposed to light the menorah in the nighttime. You're not chayiv in tzitzis at night. And even if you hold that a beged yoim is chayiv at night, why the emphasis on wearing a talis, a tzitzis, while you're lighting the menorah? So, Rabbi Emanuel Bernstein, in his book Capturing the Light, suggests, based on Rabbi Leib Hyman, that since the victory of Chanukah is rooted in the story of Avram Avinu, of the 4 kings against the 5 kings. And at that war, the king of Sodom said, V'harachush kachlach, take the rechush. And Avram Avinu says, no way! Im michud v'ad seroich nal, I'm not going to take a thread or a shoe strap. And in the merit of Avram saying, I'm not going to take the spoils of Kedar la'omer, we're zoicha tzitzis. So since we light the menorah to commemorate the war of Avraham against the 4 kings, and part of the simcha of that war is Avram Avinu said, I'm not going to take the spoils, and in the merit of that he was zoicha tzitzis, so there's an inyan of wearing your tzitzis when you light the menorah. In fact, Reb Chaim Falaji says, use the light of the menorah to check your tzitzis. And the remez is es semach David, semach, tzitzis, mezuzah, Chanukah. I would humbly add, we don't only have tzitzis from Avram, we also have tzitzis from Shem, because Shem took the simla and he covered his father. Who took the cloak to cover his father? Shem and Yefes. But Shem had more zrizus. So in the merit of Shem covering his father more than Yefes, the father of Yavan, we're zoicha to tzitzis. So again, tzitzis shows ascendancy over the Yavanim. Tzitzis shows an ascendancy over the Yavanim. You see how? Because we're zoicha to tzitzis because Shem covered his father more than Yefes. One last thing. You know, in the war of the 4 kings and the 5 kings, the king of Sodom tells Abraham, you know, you give me the people, and you take the spoils. And in the middle of that conversation, all of a sudden, Melchizedek comes, and he brings bread and wine, and he's a kohen, and he gives the bracha. Why do we need to give this whole bio of Melchizedek, king of Shalem, that he's a kohen? But he wasn't just a kohen. The pasuk says he had another position. He was also a melech. And Chazal say he lost one of his jobs. He lost the kahuna. Says Reb Leib Hyman, this is very connected to Chanukah. We know the Chashmonaim, according to the Ramban, sinned because even they were kohanim, but they usurped the malchus. And that's somewhat of a contradiction. Being a melech is a contradiction to being a kohen. And because they inappropriately took the melucha, they lost the melucha. They lost it. And actually, they were, according to the Ramban, they were wiped out. So in a certain sense, they lost the kahuna. Very similarly happened to Malki Tzedek. Malki Tzedek was a kohen, but he was also a melech. And what happened to him? He also lost the kahuna. He may have lost it to Abraham. So even the fact that the Chashmonaim usurping the Malchus and assuming the role of Malchus and Kahuna is also alluded to in the war of Malki Tzedek and Avram Avinu. So this is really an amazing understanding of the war of the 4 kings and the 5 kings, where Avram Avinu fights this war Balayla because the Yavanim were Hechshichu Eneim Shel Yisrael B'Gzeiros. And the main war was against Kedar La'omer, who according to the Ramban was Yavan. And it's amazing that Avram Avinu chased them back to their source, to Damascus. Why Damascus? They're Yavanim. No, this is the war against the Syrian Greeks. And the first time Kayin is mentioned is in this episode. And Kel Elyon is mentioned repeatedly because the Yavanim tried to be Mavatel, being Mazkir, the Shem Shamayim, and to counteract that, the Chashmonaim were Masakein, to mention the Shnas Yochanan Lekel Elyon. And we mentioned Elyon is specifically a reference to Al Yavan, Al Yavan, Al Yavan. And Avram Avinu is called Or, because he's coming against the Yavanim, Shechshichu Eneim Shel Yisrael B'Gzeiros. And the Inyan that we emphasized tzitzis at that time, because in the merit that Avram Avinu did not take from the spoils of war, and he said, now we're zoicha to tzitzis. That's the connection between tzitzis and Ner Chanukah. But when you see events unfolding in preparation for Chanukah, the downfall of Syria, recognize that the enemy in the times of Chanukah were not just regular Greeks. The Greek Empire was divided into four different regimes, and it was the Syrian Greeks that inflicted the decrees of Chanukah. So with the downfall of the regime of Syria, that is just a preparation for the great light of the Yom Tov of Chanukah. Rabbi Meir says Chanukah is a lashon of chinuch for the third Beis Hamikdash and the coming of the Geula. So when we see in our times the downfall of Syria, and we see in our times, so to speak, a victory of Chanukah, so Be'ezus Hashem, we hope that means that there are very grand times in store for the Jewish people. B'karev mamish. Rabbi say, have a great day. Kol tov.
Amen. Thank you.
Back to you.
Can I have recording stop?
Oh, you want the Marmakaimis?